This is the time we take you along to trending headlines on the newspapers this morning. I'm starting off with the Punch newspaper. And here on the Punch, this one says on the top strip, Buhari suspends Adamawa wreck and orders security agencies probe. That's on page 29. And IOCs moved $21 billion investment to other countries. The federal government is saying that. You can find details of that on page 21. A military will ensure peaceful handover come May 29th, says DHQ. You can find that on page 8. And Sudan conflict, 1,262 Nigerian students demand evacuation. 330 residents have been killed. You can find that on page 2. A moon sighted in Saudi Arabia. Muslims mark Eid al-Fitr today. National Assembly inducts lawmakers-elect on the May 7th. You can find details of that on page 25. Banana Island developer planned to rake in 22 billion naira revenue. That's on page 21. And finally on the Punch, Ogun community, 1-year blackout lingers over IKEDC and IBEDC disagreement. That's on page 4 and 5. And moving on to Daily Trust newspaper this morning. Here on Daily Trust, we have this one that says, Tinubu appoints Onanuga Marwa and 11 others into presidential inauguration committee. And on Eid al-Fitr, Buhari, Tinubu, Atiku, Lawan, Wajabiya Mila seek peace and patriotism. That's on page 7. Binani saga, Buhari approves REC suspension and others probe of security operatives. And on Sudan crisis, 4,000 Nigerian students stranded as federal government tarries on evacuation. And still here in the Daily Trust, Nigeria's oil reserve drops to 36.9 billion barrels as gas rises. Federal government concessions Onitsha port for 30 years. And the United States Congress moves to recognize Ramadan and the Eid. And with that story, we move on to the Business Day. Here in the Business Day newspaper, this one says, renewable energy seen giving SMEs edge post-patrol subsidy. And explainer, does diplomatic passport confer citizenship? That's a question I'm sure a lot of Nigerians would want to find answers to. Nigeria faces cash crunch amid rising demand. You can find details of that on page 31. Benue Kaduna killings compound Nigeria's food crisis. That's also on page 2. And Naira in circulation jumps 71% in March on page 21. Finally, on Business Day, Unilever's exit from home skincare market offers lessons. Find details of that on page 30. And on the final newspaper this morning, The Nation newspaper says, President Tinubu, governors and Sultan call for peace at Eid al-Fitr celebration. That news is on page 5 of The Nation newspaper. And still on The Nation, Bako, Wokoma, Okotete, and 10 others in transition sub-team. That's on page 5. DHQ, May 29 inauguration of Tinubu sacrosanct on page 4. Buhari axes Adamawa wreck and order security chiefs probe. And IG, DSS, DG, NSCDC boss get directive to act. That's okay. Moving on. Government to evacuate Nigerian students from Sudan. Find details of that on page 4. And ahead of subsidy removal, federal government plans 6-month petrol stockpile. And finally, this morning, Lagos issues 5 billion naira bond certificates to retirees and review judges' pay. That's on page 5. And that's it on the newspaper headlines this morning. I'm going to be having conversations about them because I have a guest with me in the studio. I have Mr. Ashodende Peters. Good morning, sir, and welcome.
Yeah, good morning. Nice having me on your show.
Nice having you. Okay, so one of the trending stories, that kept recurring in the various newspapers we read out this morning is, Nigerian students in Sudan asking to be evacuated. I think a lot of times when issues like this happen, I think sometime last year or 2 years ago, it was in India that Nigerians were asking to be evacuated from. And we've had issues like this, even when the war in Ukraine started. Nigerians had to cry out, why are we always the last people to be repatriated or, evacuated when situations like this happen?
Okay, I think the basic reason for delay most times when it comes to repatriation of our people abroad is our readiness and our plan. We do not have the type of structure that allows us to respond immediately to issues, even locally, not to talk of internationally. It took the magnanimity of the chairman of Air Peace to go to Ukraine, to go bring back Nigerians that were stranded in Ukraine, so that we could have zero casualty when it comes to Nigerians who die in the Ukraine war. So for this Sudan's case, let's go a bit into a brief history into the war in Sudan. It's actually an internal fight between the military rulership, where the head of the military, the current head, who is like the de facto president, General Abdel Fattah, is up against his deputy, General Dagalo, who controls the paramilitary. And both of them, after the overthrow Omar Bashar in 2019, they've been at each other's throats trying to see who will control. The paramilitary guys, because they are people that are very local, they are paramilitary, former warlords in several areas, they have been able to amass a whole lot of wealth through gold smuggling and others. So they have the wealth to prosecute whatever fights they are doing now. And another thing is there is the influence of Russia and US. The Russian government is working with the military in Sudan to make sure that they are able to site a naval base by the Red Sea, which is by Sudan. But the US and Britain, UAE, Saudi Arabia don't want anything like that. So they have joined forces with the other team, the Dagalo team, to make sure that Russia does not. And Russia has promised the Sudan government to supply them arms for 20 years. So you can see that it is something much more complex than what we see.
True.
The African Union is helpless, cannot do anything.
Why is that so, though? Why do we have them in the first place? If when situations like this come up, they can't help, then why do we have the African Union?
I checked the composition of the African Union. There are small countries that also have their own internal problem. Imagine Nigeria is like the biggest country in African Union, and within Nigeria itself, you have Boko Haram here, IPOB here, you have bandits here, kidnappers here, and a whole lot. Your hands are full already. How do you live here and go to Sudan to say you want to help them to keep peace? So Africa in itself has its own problem. If you look at the countries beside Sudan, is it Ethiopia? It has its own kettle of fish. Is it Chad? So many like that. So Africa is not united. It is only the United Nations that has come in. I think they've been able to help broker a ceasefire for 3 days, so that the humanitarian corridor can open. So within that 3 days, we expect that the Nigerian government will be able to enter that country and do as much as possible evacuations of Nigerians that are stranded in Sudan.
So we're just being hopeful.
We're hopeful that they will take advantage of the 3 days.
Is that what it's supposed to be? Isn't there like what's the word I'm looking for? Why do we always have to wait to the point where people are now begging to be repatriated?
Uganda has repatriated its own citizens. Tanzania has done that. But for Nigeria, a whole lot of bureaucracy. Nigeria does not have, for example, now it is the diaspora committee led by Abike Dabiri, whether they are the ones in charge of evacuations like that, or it is the National Emergency Management Agency that should do it. But you see that there's no sync between all these agencies. And at the end of the day, you find out that it will take an airline, maybe again, Air Peace, to say, okay, let me go out and help my country, since you don't even have an airline to help you. You would need an airline to go there to pick your people. Or else, you see most of them, they could take advantage of these 3 days ceasefire to begin to walk. They can walk all the way from Sudan into Chad, then into the northeast of Nigeria, Katsina, Sokoto, and all those places. So the northeast should be preparing for a whole lot of refugees, returnees that will come through that border. Because if within 3 days the Nigerian government is unable to decide immediately how to go about it, then there's a big problem.
That is a very big problem, because if we're not able to handle issues like repatriating our nationals outside, do we even have what it takes to handle refugees when they come in? Do you understand? So if these people take the walk, like you said, work for 3 days and they get home and there's no plan for them.
Most people, you know, Nigerians, they go everywhere to school. I think most of these guys are in universities in Darfur and Khartoum, and it's just, in fact, the president, when he was coming back from Lesser Hajj, had to take another route. They didn't fly over Sudan. Had to spend 2 extra hours to show you the intensity of that war. Anybody could be caught in between, because over 300 dead already. So I think, I don't know, maybe within these 3 days, the government will be able to do something.
I'm really hoping that the incoming government would be more people-oriented, you know, would be more homely, if I'm to use that word, because I cannot begin to imagine that your children are stranded in a place, in a stranger's land, and you're not worried. It's so appalling. I join my faith with you, but the main thing is planning. You have all these agencies that are supposed to do this, but they are never ready. So let's talk about the agencies, right? So away from National Emergency Agency and the Diaspora Committee, you find that a lot of agencies in Nigeria are actually, should I say, intertwined, or there is a mix-up of duties and responsibilities. Talk about the police, the NSCDC, and a lot of other security agencies who do almost exactly the same thing. So you wouldn't even know who is supposed to be doing what. And that's the same thing playing out right now with the Diaspora Committee and the National Emergency Agency. So who is supposed to, and then by the time the whole back and forth is settled, people that would have died would have died. Okay, for the National Emergency Management Agency, they may claim that, okay, we only handle national issues. It has to be something within. But I don't think the Abike Dabiri Diaspora Committee has that type of power to want to carry out evacuations. I think basically should be within the ambit of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who is represented in almost all countries in the world. And they are the ones who is supposed to liaise with these local agencies that come. I have a situation at hand. I need to move into this place to do some evacuation. There's a ceasefire already here. But like you said earlier, there's this Steve Orosanye report about several agencies of governments in Nigeria that needs to be meshed together. You have a lot of them doing almost same thing. The report will come, they will deliberate on it. Over 5, 6, 7 years now, it's just been gathering dust. Implementation has become a problem, because, you know, almost all these agencies are one way or the other used as conduit pipes for both the workers and the politicians to help themselves. So that's why it's difficult to implement. But like you said, maybe the new administration will come, look at those reports and try to implement the right things so that we can have sanity in that space. Amen to that. Okay, so another story that was trending on the newspapers is the Adamawa, the Binani, and the wreck. Finally, the president has spoken, asking that there be a probe and an investigation. Do you think that is actually going to do the work required and serve the justice we're looking for?
I think it's a welcome development, actually. For people who are just coming into that news, all of us, maybe some of us, we know what happened in Adamawa when the REC usurped the power of the returning officer and announced Binani as the winner of the election, even without any results. Collation was still ongoing, and he was announcing the result. And with him was the commandant of the NCDC in the state commissioner of police, and some DSS officials. They were with him announcing that result, that illegality. But now, he has done the crime, and he would have his day in court. Other agencies are also under probe. The DSS, NSDC, the IG of police, because his men were part of it too. They're under serious probe. And I think the sentence is 3 years. I think the government should make this as an example, because what that man has done is what you call sacrilege. He wanted to step on the entire Adamawa people. True. He wanted to take over. He gave himself the power of INEC, even the power of the judiciary to declare that someone is a winner and return elected. He doesn't have such powers. And now, it's sad that the man is a lawyer. So surprised.
Wow.
And a recipient of a national award, MNI. They should strip him of that award, and I think MBA too, the Council for Legal Education, all of them should come out. This type of person is giving them a bad publicity. People already have problem with the judiciary, and now for seeing a lawyer doing this type of thing, of course, it speaks volume.
True.
So I think the government will see to the end of this, because Falano and a whole lot of people are already on the matter. If you don't nip it in the bud now, we have elections in the future. We might have to go this way too. All
right. Thank you so much, Mr. Peters Shodende. Thank you for coming on this segment of the show and doing justice to the topics. I really enjoyed having this conversation with you.
Good.
It is still iBrand Daybreak. When we return from this quick break, we'll be delving into the topic of the day. Do not go anywhere. Stay with us.